Mike and Sarah had been married for 7 years. On the outside, they seemed like the perfect couple. Sarah was vibrant, outgoing, and the life of every party, while Mike was a calm and reserved type, always working to ensure their lives were stable and comfortable. Mike adored Sarah and would do anything for her, but lately, he'd noticed a shift in her behavior. She had become more distant, spent a lot of time on her phone, and frequently worked late or went out with friends. One evening, Mike decided to surprise Sarah by taking her out for dinner at her favorite restaurant. He wanted to reconnect and reignite the spark in their marriage. But when he arrived at her workplace to pick her up, Sarah wasn't there. Confused, he texted her, "Hey, I'm at your office. Where are you?" It took her several minutes to reply. "Out with clients. I'll be late. Don't wait up." Mike's gut told him something was wrong. Instead of going home, he decided to follow his instincts. He drove to the bar where Sarah often went with her colleagues. Sure enough, her car was parked outside. Mike hesitated, debating whether he should go in or just leave. But curiosity and suspicion won. Inside, he spotted Sarah sitting in a cozy corner booth. She wasn't alone. A man, one of her co-workers, was sitting across from her. They were laughing, leaning in close, and at one point, Sarah touched his hand in a way that made Mike's stomach drop. Mike didn't confront her. He walked out, his heart pounding, and decided he needed to think before acting. Over the next few days, he became a detective in his own marriage. He checked her phone bills, noticed late-night texts, and even found excuses to check her social media. All the signs were there. Sarah was having an affair. But the worst part came a week later. Sarah threw a party at their house for some of her work friends. Mike played the polite host, pretending he knew nothing. He kept his eyes on Sarah and her co-worker, noting their lingering glances and shared whispers. At one point, Sarah, clearly tipsy, started making jokes about Mike. "Oh, Mike's such a bore sometimes," she said, laughing with her friends. "He's just so predictable. Honestly, I don't know how I keep up with him." The room erupted in laughter, but Mike felt humiliated. That was the final straw. Over the next few weeks, Mike planned his revenge. He hired a private investigator to gather concrete evidence of the affair. Then, he began quietly liquidating some of their shared assets, ensuring Sarah wouldn't have access to them if things went south. He also reached out to a divorce lawyer, preparing for the inevitable fallout. The breaking point came when Sarah took a weekend trip, claiming it was a work retreat. Mike knew better. He tracked her location using a device he'd hidden in her car and saw that she was at a secluded resort. When Sarah returned, Mike was waiting. Calmly, he handed her a folder containing pictures, text messages, and even receipts from a rendezvous. She turned pale. "Mike, I can explain." "Don't bother," he interrupted. "You humiliated me in front of your friends, lied to my face, and thought you'd get away with it. Now it's my turn." Within days, Mike had filed for divorce. He exposed Sarah's affair to her family and friends, making sure the truth came out. He even sent the evidence to her boss, leading to disciplinary action for Sarah and her co-worker. In the end, Mike walked away with most of their shared assets, leaving Sarah with little more than her guilt and ruined reputation. While it was painful, Mike felt a sense of closure knowing he had taken control of a situation that once left him powerless after the divorce papers were served. Sarah initially tried to deny everything, but the evidence Mike had was irrefutable. Her pleas for forgiveness fell on deaf ears. "Mike, it was just a mistake," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was confused, and I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, we can work this out." Mike stared at her, his expression cold and unyielding. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something you didn't mean. You made choices, deliberate, repeated choices to betray me. There's no coming back from that." The divorce proceedings were swift, thanks to Mike's meticulous preparation. Sarah lost the comfortable life she had taken for granted. Her reputation at work was in tatters, and her affair partner, unwilling to face the backlash, had cut ties with her. Mike, on the other hand, used this time to rebuild. He reconnected with old friends and picked up hobbies he had neglected during the marriage. He even started going to the gym, focusing on his health and well-being. One day, a mutual friend approached him at a coffee shop. "You've really turned things around, Mike," she said. "Sarah's a mess. She's been telling anyone who'll listen that she regrets everything. She's miserable without you." Mike shrugged. "She made her bed. Now she has to lie in it." Months later, Mike was invited to a party by one of his co-workers. There, he met Laura, a kind and intelligent woman who shared his interests and values. Unlike Sarah, Laura was genuine and down-to-earth, and the two quickly hit it off. Sarah, meanwhile, struggled to pick up the pieces of her life. She often found herself scrolling through Mike's social media, seeing him thrive with new friends and adventures. One day, she sent him a message. "I'm sorry for everything. I wish I could undo the pain I caused you. You didn't deserve any of it." Mike read the message but didn't respond. Instead, he closed the app and returned to the present, where he was finally happy and at peace. Revenge, Mike realized, wasn't just about exposing Sarah's betrayal. It was about proving to himself that he could rise above it and live a better life without her. And he had done just that. Months passed, and as time healed the wounds of the past, Mike found himself growing more content with his new life. He continued seeing Laura, and their relationship blossomed into something meaningful, built on trust and mutual respect. Two things he hadn't realized he'd been missing for so long that as for Sarah, her life was far less rosy. She had attempted to rekindle old friendships, but people had grown distant, wary of her reputation. The affair had left a permanent scar on her social standing. She no longer had the same freedom or influence she once enjoyed, and it was evident to everyone around her. One evening, Sarah called Mike. Her voice was trembling, something in it breaking through the usual bravado she'd held onto since the divorce. "Mike, I need to talk. Can we meet?" Mike had no desire to meet in person, but part of him was curious to see if she had truly learned anything from the consequences of her actions. After a brief pause, he agreed to meet at a local cafe. When Sarah arrived, she looked worn. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep. It was clear that she hadn't been doing well. "Mike, I've lost everything," she admitted quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. "I thought I could control everything, but I was wrong. I hurt you. I hurt everyone who cared about me. I don't know how to fix it." Mike leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. He hadn't expected this kind of admission, but it didn't change anything. He looked her in the eye and replied, "You can't fix it. The damage has been done. What's important now is that you live with the consequences." She wiped her eyes, her voice breaking. "I deserve this, don't I? I've lost you, I've lost my job, and I've lost my self-respect. I don't know how to move on from here." Mike felt a pang of sympathy for the person Sarah had become, but there was also a part of him that couldn't forget the way she had humiliated him, or how much pain her actions had caused. "I can't fix you, Sarah. You have to do that for yourself. But don't expect anyone to feel sorry for you now. What you need to understand is that this is your new reality. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." There was a long silence between them. Sarah didn't respond, instead staring down at her hands. Mike stood up, ready to leave. "I hope you figure things out, but I'm done being part of your story." As he walked away, Sarah stayed seated, alone with the weight of her regret. Mike realized then that the final act of revenge wasn't about watching her suffer or witnessing her downfall. It was about taking back his own power, about living a life free from the shadows of betrayal. And with that, Mike felt a true sense of closure. He had let go, no longer bound by the past or by Sarah's toxic presence. His life with Laura, his renewed sense of self, and the peace he'd built all felt like the ultimate revenge. A life far better than the one he had ever imagined with Sarah. Sarah, on the other hand, was left to face the consequences of her choices alone, with no one to blame but herself. The empty hole in her life, the one she had once filled with lies and deceit, now felt like an endless void that no apology could ever fill. As the months passed, Mike's life only continued to improve. He and Laura grew even closer, with every shared experience and each passing day strengthening their bond. They traveled together, laughed together, and began to build a life that felt whole, something Mike had never truly experienced with Sarah. His past with her, while painful, had taught him invaluable lessons, and he had emerged from the wreckage more confident and aware of what he wanted in life. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to be spiraling further. Her attempts to repair her broken relationships were futile. She reached out to old friends, only to find them hesitant to welcome her back. Her family, while still supportive, made it clear that they could no longer tolerate the person she had become. Her ex-colleagues distanced themselves, and the affair had left her with a permanent stigma that would be hard to erase. But Sarah's downward trajectory didn't end there. In the wake of her public disgrace, her ex-lover, the man she had been seeing behind Mike's back, had moved on. He no longer wanted anything to do with her, and when Sarah tried to reach out to him, he ignored her calls and messages. This left Sarah feeling even more isolated, with no one left to turn to. One evening, after a particularly lonely day, Sarah found herself sitting in her car outside Mike's old apartment. She wasn't sure what she was hoping for. Perhaps she wanted closure, or maybe she just wanted to see if Mike had truly moved on. Her heart ached as she thought back to the life they had shared, the life she had destroyed. When she saw Mike and Laura walking by the building, laughing and holding hands, it hit her all at once. The realization that Mike had truly moved on, and that she was the one left behind, was almost too much to bear. She watched them for a while, hidden in the shadows, feeling the weight of the mistakes she had made. The anger and bitterness that had fueled her during their marriage seemed to return, but now it was directed inward. She was consumed by guilt, resentment, and regret. The next day, Sarah tried one more time to reach out to Mike. She sent him a long message, explaining that she was sorry for everything, that she was finally seeing the full scope of her actions. She confessed to the pain she had caused, and admitted that she had been wrong in every way possible. Mike didn't respond immediately, and when he finally did, his message was short and to the point. "I've already moved on, Sarah. You need to do the same. You can't keep holding on to the past, because it's over. We're both better off apart." This was the final blow to Sarah's already fragile state. She realized that, no matter how much she wished to undo the damage she had done, it was far too late. Mike was done, and so was she. Her life had changed irrevocably in the months that followed. Sarah continued to try to put the pieces of her life back together, but nothing ever felt the same. The relationship she tried to salvage had been too damaged, and the new one she tried to form never seemed to offer the support and love she had once taken for granted. She sought therapy, trying to work through her guilt and self-loathing, but it felt like a never-ending struggle. Mike, however, continued to thrive. He and Laura eventually moved in together, and Mike found himself enjoying a life of peace and happiness he never thought possible after the heartbreak of his marriage. He focused on building his career, growing his friendships, and making memories that would last a lifetime. Occasionally, he would think back to Sarah, but only for a moment. The past was something he had let go of long ago. His life was no longer defined by her betrayal, and he had learned that the greatest revenge wasn't in punishing her. It was in moving on, finding joy, and embracing the future without the weight of the past hanging over him. As for Sarah, she was left with nothing but the painful knowledge that her actions had cost her everything she once held dear. The life she had tried to build on lies had crumbled, and no amount of regret or apologies could rebuild the trust that had been lost. Ultimately, the one person she had hurt the most, Mike, had become the one who emerged victorious, not through revenge, but through resilience and self-love. And that, in the end, was the truest form of justice.